So, welcome. It's terrific to have you joining us today, the renewal of our conversation series. These are times when we can despair or we can engage, and this is a conversation that I think will inspire. Representative Bush is someone who has been part of the movements of our time, is now inside the Congress, and has done extraordinary work on the range of issues our justice correspondent, Ellie Mistel, will talk about today. So Ellie, the nation's justice correspondent, he's been covering the courts, the criminal justice system, race and politics, graduate of Harvard College, Harvard Law School, former associate of Debevoise and Plimpton. They always make those names so tough. Ellie was the executive editor of Above the Law prior to joining the nation, and he is a prolific Twitter personality. That doesn't do justice. He goes to war sometimes, and he's a frequent guest, speaking for himself, for the nation on MSNBC, CNN, Sirius, XM, numerous radio programs and podcasts. And since joining the nation, Ellie's become one of the most sought after legal analysts in the country. His forthcoming book, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution, will be released this March by the New Press, and it's sure to bring his remarkable verdant mind to countless new readers. I want to add that not many nation writers have New York Times crossword puzzle clues named after for them, but it's an honor to have this conversation. Ellie wrote, one of the pieces I loved was a few weeks ago, maybe he wrote about how Lonnie Guinier, who was a longtime Nation editorial board member and many other things, taught me almost everything I know about voting rights. And I recommend, if you missed it, please go back. It's really beautiful. And this is the first in 2022 of, I think, a terrific conversation series. Let me just mention a few. Jamie Raskin, Representative Jamie Raskin, in conversation with me, John Nichols, and the executive director of the Institute for Policy Studies, Monday, February 28th. We have a poetry reading on the 9th at 7 p.m., reminding those that the nation is about books and arts and culture. And then Ellie Mistel in conversation with Dahlia Lithwick of Slate, and exciting March 23rd, Art Spiegelman in conversation with Viet Thanh Nguyen. So I welcome all of you to those conversations. You'll hear more information. And over to you, Ellie, and thank you, Representative Bush, for being part of this conversation. You honor us with your work.
Thank you, Katrina, for that wonderful introduction. Welcome, everybody, to our 2022 conversation series. I am the aforementioned Ellie Mistel. I am the nation's justice correspondent, but Representative Cori Bush is the foot of justice on the ground. I mean, if you are familiar with her history and her life's work, I mean, we have the opportunity to talk today to a woman who puts boots on the ground. This is foreign to me. I'm not good at walking. I don't like being cold, like these are not my skills. Representative Bush is out there in the cold, in the heat, trying to do activism at a level that we used to do all the time in this country. And now we do kind of less and less, and Representative Bush is one of the people who is trying to make this an activist country as opposed to a slacktivist country from where I sit. So it is it is wonderful to be able to talk to you today, Representative Bush. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, I want to start with your state. I want to start with your home because Missouri, wow.
Wow, it's right.
Right? Like they can do some things. So one of the more recent bills coming out of Missouri, Senate Bill 666, I'm not making that up.
Nope.
It is a bill, it's kind of styled as a stand your ground bill, but it's really more than that. It would force the prosecution to prove affirmatively that the person was not acting in self-defense. if they shoot somebody. It would prevent cops in many cases from even arresting a person who shot somebody and claimed self-defense after the fact. So if you can imagine the Ahmaud Arbery situation in Georgia, where these men shot Arbery and police came and then let the men go. The Missouri law would require that kind of deference to these armed vigilantes. I know you don't have, you're a federal position, not a state position, but what do you think about what's going on in your state? What do you think about what's going on with this bill, and how are people organizing around this to stop it?
It looks more, what can I do to bring forward some attention? What can I do to just stir a pot? What can I do to out Trump people? Like it's just this really weird, this really weird time, but it's not just in Missouri, it's happening all over the country. But in Missouri, we are, I have to always remind people that, even though we're not the South, Missouri is not in the South. Some people, it's like north, it's like the northern part of the South, but it's not the South. But we were still a slave state, and so just taking it back like that hangs over our state. And right now, when we look at how this law came about, we look at how we have a copycat SB 8 law, that the abortion ban. It just speaks to what's happening all across this country right now, where this desire to be out front for things to that will make a part of keep the white supremacy alive, keep the majority, keep the majority supreme, keep, all of those things are just anything that would help to bring about equity and equality in this country is being attacked.
Do you have a sense of how, because I think Missouri is so much, it's always called the bellwether state. And I do think that, even though it's no longer purple, right, it no longer swings like it used to, maybe like it did in the 70s. I still think that it's a bellwether for what's happened to conservatism in this country, right? Missouri has radicalized, the conservatives in Missouri seem to have radicalized, in the course of our lifetimes. We're talking about a state, that's known for Harry Truman, that elected Claire McCaskill, that has now gone to terrorist fist bump Josh Hawley.
Yes.
Like how do we get there, in one generation? And what's your sense of what's happened to the right wing in Missouri, which used to be, much more emblematic of America as a whole?
Well, first of all, they have me. They have me in Missouri. They have people just like me. They have people who are, yes, you got the Josh Hawley folks and those that support him and his work and his vision. But then you have people who are from movement work, or even that are not even were never a part of the movement, that just love justice and in their state. So, it's funny because people will say on social media, I cannot believe that Josh Hawley and Cori Bush are from the same state, but it's indicative of the entire country and where people are. Like, this line was drawn, and I would say that after President Obama, and then when you look at how, I guess there was this anger, so much anger about him being the president, that there was this quiet galvanizing happening in my state, so that when that 2016 election happened, I remember waking up and thinking, so I fell asleep late. I was trying to wait up for all the results and ended up falling asleep. And when I woke up, I could not believe that all down the line in Missouri, seats that had been Democratic, statewide seats that had been Dem seats, were now Republican. And then, of course, Donald Trump took the win for our state. That I couldn't believe it, because I was wondering, like, where did all of this happen? Like, what, you weren't hearing it, you weren't seeing it on social media, like, what happened? But now because of that, that was after Ferguson. It was, so you had galvanizing for peace, galvanizing for justice and equality, galvanizing for Black lives happening. But then you had this other thing, which was present in Ferguson too. We had Oath Keepers on the ground in Ferguson. But then there was this other organizing that got us here today, to where we have people who are seated in Congress, who are sworn in, took an oath, seated in Congress, who have been speaking about, in order to have this revolution, they want to see there needs to be bloodshed. They are speaking about things that actually divide this country even the more. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. Like, the people burn the whole thing down just to be king of the ashes. It's like, if a Black man got it, then we can't let anybody else have it. I want to go towards where you do have some power. And that's in the federal sphere, right? So when we look at states like Missouri, when we look at states that have been radicalized, this is not the first time that's happened in this country. This is not the first time that we've had some trouble down in the Missouris of this country. And it's certainly not the first time that a states' rights argument has been used to frustrate the Constitution and frustrate kind of federal power to stop violence and vigilante justice against Black folks. Not the first time. We are supposed to be able to use federal power to stop that. That's a big divide between liberals and conservatives, whether or not the federal government can stop the states from doing their dirt. We coming into 2020, there was a lot of talk about a police reform, about a George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I voted for a president who said he was going to support that. What happened? Like, to use the Bugs Bunny, where did we make the left turn in Albuquerque? So that now police reform doesn't even seem to be on the table as we move towards a midterm election cycle.
Right, we're not even hearing about it anymore. And it's not that police murder isn't happening. It's not that we fixed the problem. It didn't go away. There's, we are not seeing accountability just across the board. Yes, there was this huge celebration.
We got one white guy. We got one guy.
Huge celebration. We can't believe it. I mean, we had tears and, but that's where we are. That if one police officer that does such an egregious thing, if accountability happens, then the whole world is like, wow, we won. But we shouldn't even know, because it should just be the regular thing, because it shouldn't even be happening, And so if it does happen that somebody is killed by police and there's this racism and all of that plays a part in it, that we just know that they're going to be brought, that justice is going to happen and that accountability will come into play. But we're not there. So looking at how George Floyd Justice and Policing, how that bill did not get signed into law while millions of people were out on the streets protesting still. How that bill, that was when the momentum was, that was when there was this push. That was when corporations, you were seeing these, these huge signs, being these big drop cloth type signs being, hung on sides of buildings, and everybody was putting up these signs in their windows, all of these stores and all of these ads on television, Black Lives Matter, that was when that was the biggest push. And so to show up a year later, I'm in Congress at that time, and to see it stalling, and it's just like, it's like the little engine that could, but didn't, when we talk about the current approach to public safety, we know it's not working. It's not working for children. It's not working for families. Particularly, it's not working for Black and Brown communities. We talk about it so much. Why do we keep having to say we've been devastated by police violence? We've been devastated by mass incarceration. We've been devastated by criminalization. But when it comes to actually getting legislation across to help to fix it, We can't get that, but we can have a celebration that tells us about Juneteenth. Yes, thank you. We need people to know about Juneteenth. But what I need is to save lives in the Black community. That's what I need. And so when we talk about where we are with this legislation, I know that there has been talk about taking out components of the legislation and doing the work to get those pieces across. So whether it's banning the chokeholds, or if it's part of the registry, dealing with the registry, or if people want to pull parts of it and try to have stand-on legislation, I can understand that thinking. I just personally don't agree. I don't agree because when we get something, if we get the ban on the chokeholds, if we get, we know we're not going to get any qualified immunity, but if we get a piece, then people will say, oh, well, we gave you something. Oh, you got that. Why are you still whining? People are still getting killed. Oh, well, they're getting killed because it's their fault, because we did this thing. So no, we need actual real change. And what we should be looking at, what would have saved Ayanna Stanley Jones's life? Mm-hmm. What would have saved Tamir Rice's life? What would have saved Mike Brown's life? What would have saved Eric Garner's life? What would have saved, like over and over again, what would have saved Trayvon Martin's, well, in his case it's a little different, but what would have saved the lives of so many? And are we actually bringing forward legislation for that? What, Sandra Bland, how do we save her life? How do we save Breonna Taylor? So that's what we should be doing. So for me, we need to be pushing for all of it. And that's why I won't stop. And then I just saw an article just a few days ago, about a week ago, that talked about how police violence, police murder last year topped the years before, several years before. So it didn't get better. We didn't decrease it.
It's literally worse now than it was 2 years ago.
Yes.
Look, when you say like, what would have saved Tamir Rice's life, I always think, what's going to save my son's life, right? Like I've got 2 Black sons. They're going to end up being Black in this country their whole lives. And I think a lot about what needs to happen to keep them safe from the cops. Exactly. I don't like it. I was on a trolley in San Francisco, and there was a cop on it, and the cop had my boy come over and put a sticker on. I'm like, don't touch my kid. I don't know where you been. I'm so worried about what these people will do to my kids. And I can't get, so my question, there's a question here, I promise. So my question is, do you feel the warm embrace of the current administration on these issues? Because I watched from afar, I watched on TV when Biden won, and he banged the podium. He said that he knew who had got him elected, that Black people had got him elected, and he wasn't going to abandon us. And here we are, and we had from my perspective, the thing that we asked for, the thing that people were out in the streets asking for, the thing that people were out in the streets risking their lives in a pandemic asking for, is the one thing that's definitely not going to happen. So is that the administration, the executive branch kind of letting us down? Is it just the Senate? Is it just 2 senators? Does it really come down to that? Where's the roadblock right now? And are we getting the support we need from all, allies on this issue?
I think there are multiple roadblocks. I don't think that that roadblock stops with just one person, or just the administration, or just those that were at the table doing the work to get George Floyd Justice and Policing across. I feel like there are several folks that could have done more and still need to do more, even though we passed it in the House. But what happened when we passed it in the House, and then did we make sure that our Senate colleagues push this thing to fight for it, to really get it across? Were we supportive of those that were at the table? Karen Bass from the House, were we, how did we help Karen Bass? What were we teeing up for her to be able to walk into those rooms with, when she had to sit down and have those conversations? What did we arm her with to be when police unions were coming and they had their ideas about what this should look like, and then the activist community was mobilized, the activist community was pushing, but we need more people who actually listen to and care about what the activists are saying. I remember being that person. I remember what it felt like to be out there on the ground of Ferguson, more than 400 days strong. We protested. We were there when the lights, camera, flash, all of that was gone. We were there, rain, sleet, hail, snow, hell no, we won't go. Like you said, we were there. But that, having that and not caring what people thought, not caring about how it's going to look to others, and did we piss somebody off, not caring about any of that, but just pushing forward with what we needed. That's what we need right now in Congress. So in the Senate, that having two people at the table, I don't feel that was enough, because there were not enough voices. And where were the voices of the activists seated at the table? I kept saying, hey, put me in, coach, because there is a voice. I was, because I said there's a voice that's missing. Because when you're telling me that, okay, we can get this legislation across as long as we pull out the ending qualified immunity part, as long as we remove that section that will give the stand, that will change the standard, so that we can push forward with holding police accountable. And so when you tell me you're going to take those things out, and we're saying that, hey, as activists, those were the things that we needed because the legislation wasn't full enough for us in the first place. And you're saying we're saying this is what we needed because we were the ones on the ground. We were the ones not just calling the family saying, hey, we stand with you. What can we do for you? But we were actually out there with them fighting. So right now, yeah, it's stalled, but I didn't stall. My team didn't stall. There are other members of Congress that have not stopped. We will continue to push this and work with those activists around the country to help get a legislation forward.
You've talked a lot about qualified immunity, and this is a hobby horse of mine. I know Ayanna Pressley has had a bill for a long time, just single focus, just get that done and just take that out of the law. But we all know that qualified immunity is not a statute; it's a judge-made doctrine. The Supreme Court made it up.
Yes,
they could unmake it up.
They can. Right? They can.
Which brings us to your leadership on this SCOTUS, on the Supreme Court nominee. You've written a letter kind of supporting Biden's idea to nominate a Black woman for that job. I've got my own thoughts here, but tell me a little bit about why you think it's important to have this different, diverse voice on the Supreme Court, even though, as far as we can tell, that voice will be a different, diverse voice that's still on the losing side of a 6-3 Supreme Court.
Right. We have to get in the door. Just like for me, I'm the very first Black woman to represent Missouri in Congress in the history of the state of Missouri. I tell people, I'm at the door holding it open. It wasn't for me to go in the door and let the door close behind me. I'm in the door and I'm holding the door open for so many others to come in. That's the same thing. We need somebody that is there. We need to break this 230-year situation where all but 7 Supreme Court justices have been white men, and of course, not one being a Black woman. Black women have been here. Like we've been here, we've been working, we live here, many of us, our ancestors didn't come here because they wanted to, and we can't be represented. It's past time for a Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court. Why is it that we have to even ask at this point in 2022? We're like, hey, it'd be great to have a Black woman sitting there. White men make up about 30% of the U.S. population, but account for nearly 94% of all Supreme Court justices. Why is that? And so when we look at what we need, we're not, and for me, it hasn't just been, okay, we want a Black woman. We don't want just a face. We don't want just a face. What we're talking about is someone that comes from the experiences that other people may not be able to identify with the same way. What we're talking about is the same way that I liken it to the same way that I walked in Congress. People, oh, Cori, first of all, it's going to be hard to win as a Black woman in Missouri Congress. It's just going to be hard. People, you're not going to get voted for. Oh, Cori, you're an activist. Oh, Cori, you don't have a big name or big title. You don't have money. You don't come from money. You're not an attorney. All of those things. But there is a voice that comes with me because I'm not attached to all of those things. There is a voice that I can speak to. There are things that I can say that I know that I can, there's a perspective that comes with that. And so for me, looking at not just a Black person, but someone with a strong track record of protecting reproductive justice. And I said justice, reproductive justice, because we miss that when we just talk about reproductive rights. We miss the justice and the equity piece. So when we talk about someone who's strong, has a history of fighting for our right to vote, a justice who is ready to rule with conviction on cases that'll impact the climate crisis and protections of workers. That's what we're looking at. Student debt. Hey, Black women carry, I just talked about Black women carry, we carry so much student debt. We're number one and we carry it the longest. So we can speak to that differently. We can speak to policing differently. So this is why we need someone from a Black woman that is from our communities that has already been doing the work. Because let me say this, I care about what you do now, but I care more about what you used to do. Show us the work. I'm from the show me state. Show me who you were and what you've done.
Look, I 100% with you. I just wrote an article about this where I think we need to emphasize the personal histories of some of these nominees. We're talking for some of these potential candidates. We're talking about people who have worked themselves through college, people who graduated from top law schools, and then instead of taking the money, went and worked for a federal public defender, went and worked in public service as like I took the money when I got it. I was pay me, but these women didn't do that. And that's why they're, I think, in the position that they are now, where they can be honestly well considered for this position. I want to transition and don't forget, just to the audience, we're going to take questions, so please put them in. I can talk for 2 hours with Representative Bush, but please send us your questions so we can get to them. But before we turn to audience questions, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the speech you recently gave on the floor of Congress, reminding people of the country they've been living in this entire time, I think is one way of putting it. Really kind of explaining on the floor of Congress what slavery was, what the Middle Passage was, how recent it was. It's one of the things that always kind of gets me when we talk about this. The white people always want to act like slavery was this kind of thing that happened in the long ago, like right after the Magna Carta was signed or something, right? It's not, right? That's not how it was. It happened just now, right? Mm-hmm. And many of us, kind of people our age, our parents grew up in the segregated South. Our great grandparents were slaves. Yes. And you had to explain that to Congress. And I guess my first question is, and I know kind of the answer, but like, why did you feel that here in 2022, you needed to explain to the representatives of this country what this country is?
Because with this big push to ban books, this big push to, this talk about, critical race theory as if it's being taught to third graders, all over the country. This big push. And even if it was, the truth has to be made available. If we're going to talk about every other piece of history that promotes white supremacy, every other piece of history that makes America sound great, if we're going to promote that, you got to tell the whole story. And for me, I listening to all the talk, all the rhetoric about, what parents right now, especially in certain counties, even in my own state, what they don't want taught in schools. When I think about how I wasn't really taught You know, I learned about slavery and first of all, that our history didn't start with slavery. Our history started with us being in Africa, living our lives, minding our own business. But I learned about the transatlantic slave trade. I learned about the Reconstruction. I learned about Jim Crow. I learned about segregation, civil rights, Black Power, the Black Liberation Movement. I learned about that from my dad. And so I learned it at home, and then a little bit was reinforced a little bit in school here or there, until I went to high school. But we should be in a better place now. And so for me, writing that speech was about speaking to the 12-year-old. I was thinking about the 9-year-old that's not going to get this information, and how can we drop seeds that they will then go out later and like try to find, and more would sprout up out of them later. That's what that was about. And so saying middle passage was important. I had to say that because somebody may listen like, oh, I never heard of that. What is the middle passage? So, and then for my colleagues, because some of them are standing with this, to try to make sure that books that talk about slavery are banned. I know some people said to me on social media, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Slavery is taught in schools. Really? Let's talk about what that looks like. And if it's truly taught in your area, great, but that's not how it is for across the country. And when I think about how even there are people today that still don't even understand that something like our last names. That's why I put that in there, because my last name is Bush. You know how hard it was for me to run the first time with the last name Bush? And people didn't know how hard that was. Yes, I don't look like the other Bushes. I don't look like those Bushes. I don't.
We ain't friends.
Right. We look different, but I needed people to understand that we get to, as Black folks who are descendants of enslaved Africans, we get to carry that with.
Oh, I got a frozen here. So I'm going to assume that somebody on the tech side is working. Are you back?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Cool.
Yes.
I was just saying, look, I talk about this a lot from the perspective of this fight about critical race theory is really a fight for what y'all want white kids to know, because Black kids are going to learn, because Black parents, we never trusted your schools to teach the real history, right? My third grader, my 9-year-old is already getting the critical race at home, right? It's on me as a Black parent to tell him what I know the schools aren't going to talk about. Oh, they teach slavery in schools. Nah, I can tell. Here's how I know you don't teach slavery in schools. Because you can't. Because it's too horrible. Yeah. You can't actually. I have kids. I'm not actually telling my 9-year-old, precious cherubim son what slavery was like. He's too young to learn about violent rapes and sticking firecrackers up people's butts and the kinds of things that slavery was actually like. He's got to be older, right? He's got to be able to have a drink after he hears what slavery was really like. All right. So they're not teaching any of that actually in schools. This is just a question of whether we want white kids to have the opportunity to learn about the country that they've been living in this entire time, or whether they want to wait till my son essentially has to tell them in college, because they're going to learn someday. It's just a question of
yeah. And then why are we protecting that? Because the thing is, there is this meme that has been all over social media. I don't know who it is, so I can't credit them, but whoever did it, thanks. There's this meme about Ruby Bridges, and it talks about how, Ruby Bridges had to go to school. She had to go to school as this child, and she had to deal with the racism. She had to deal with those attacks as a child. She had to live through that. And so if she could live it and walk it out just like so many others, why can't we teach white kids what happened? Why are we coddling them to the point to where, oh, we don't want you to know? This is the thing, and America has a history of this. And I look, don't do the dirt and not want it to be, don't try to sweep it up under the rug. No, you did it, be full chested and stick your, I did that thing, but America has this thing where we'll allow atrocities. Look at Tulsa, the Tulsa race massacre, of 1921. Look at how it is known that the government had a hand in what happened. And it's like, oh, but we don't want to talk about that. Let's not talk about it. No, we do need to talk about it, and there has to be reparation. There has to be accountability, because we're talking about human lives. So there has to be. And so I'm going to hold America, but America said, we supposed to be, it was life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and we're supposed to be all created equal, and all of that stuff. Well, then let's make America what America says it is.
Did you get any reactions to your speech from your colleagues, from your new colleagues in the halls of Congress? Was there any good or bad pushback or support?
I didn't hear anything not from my colleagues. I didn't hear a single word. It may be there, but I don't go checking for them. So, I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting on the time when, it's time for them to go yet. I'm just waiting.
I got to ask this question, and I hate to have to ask it, but I feel like I do need to ask it. Do you feel safe at work?
No, not. No, there was no pause. There was no, I don't feel, no. And it's sad because, I was told that before I got there, because I walked in the door with security issues. I'm from the Ferguson uprising. So we've had security issues for years. So I walked in the door saying, hey, look, actually before I was sworn in, while I was still in orientation, I said, hey, you all, this is the deal. What does security look like here? I just want to know, what I need to do. Oh, safest place you could be. This is, no worries here. You're good here. You're outside of here, I don't know, but here you're good. Well, that wasn't the case, and it's still not the case, and it's even worse now. So no, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe for me. I don't feel safe for my staff. Yeah, I don't feel safe for our Muslim community members that are there every single, our Muslim members, but also their staff. I don't feel safe for any of us. And actually nothing is happening to make us, especially, let me have this carve out of Black and brown people. And our Asian community members, there's nothing, not enough anyway, that would make me feel safe.
I'm so glad you brought up the staff, because I feel like people don't always understand this. The principal, you're a principal now. The principal has the ability to get some security and some protection, right? But the staff are so often just on their own, just out on their own, and vulnerable. Yeah. I think to some of the worst influences in the society, flames that are fanned by other members of Congress, which yeah. I never understand. It's like, my version of this is so small time compared to yours, but it's like I never understand when somebody is allegedly debating me on Twitter, and then you see the kinds of people that show up to support them. And I'm like, well, if you want to be reasonable, whatever, Andrew Sullivan, how can you suborn the people who support you? Look at the people on your side versus the people on my side. And they never answer that question, right? And I have the same question for people in Congress. Even if some of these conservatives in Congress want to themselves claim that they are not advocating violence, how can they ignore the people on their side supporting them who are clearly advocating violence? You ever have an answer for that?
Yeah, I don't understand. But then they will talk over and over again about the Bible and and all of that. Like my Bible, that's not where my Bible goes. My Bible is not down with what you're allowing. And the thing is, like you said, our staff, they are totally open. They're totally open to everything. And then because they're staff, because they're not members, there is this whole other level of feeling like, what they can tell, what they can say, how they can react if a member does or says something, and so that's why we have to advocate for our staff. And I make sure that that my staff know that that as best I can, we are going to try to make this as safe of a place as possible, and I think because when people sign up to take take the job. There is no part of it that says, when you walk in, just know when you sign up for this job, you are putting your life on the line to work in Congress, as a press secretary, or to work in Congress as a legislative, assistant. You're putting your life, at risk. That's not what that's not a thing. And so I am looking to leadership to make some changes, and even for members, because members, like, I can't have security. The House, U.S. House of Representatives does not give me security, at all. Like, there is no, I've asked. And asked. There are other members who've asked. We've asked multiple times, but there is nothing. We just get, oh, well, yeah, no. It's just a no. So we have to, our campaigns have to fund, how we get, how we have protection. And so,
yeah, no, you have to fund it out of your own pocket. That's one less direct mail from your constituents, because you gotta have a security team.
To stay alive to do the work.
Yep. Kind of as a segue to an audience question that I want to ask you. Speaking of signing up for the job, right? How do you? The question is from Sophie. How do you stay connected to the activist communities while in some ways being a part of the hegemonic power structure? Now that you're part of, and that's, I think that's a really difficult challenge for people from your communities, from my communities. How do you stay connected with where you came from when you are kind of enveloped in the elite establishment DC bubble?
Yeah, I still show up to actions and events that are happening locally. So I'm still a part of those things. I'm, I still, whenever we're bringing forward legislation, or we have a question about someone else's legislation and we want to know how people feel, we have those conversations with the activist community. So depending on what the subject is, what the legislation is about, we'll reach out to those organizations or those groups that do that work. So we bring activists in every piece of what we do. Now, I may not be able to be on the ground at everything like I used to, but when I'm in St. Louis, I'm on the ground. If there is something going on, I'm there. And that was a promise that I made, and I still will. Hopefully there will not be a reason why we'll need to protest something, having to do with police brutality or anything like that, but if that happens, I'm not going to say, oh, I'm in Congress now, I can't. No, I'm Cori. So I'm out there on the ground because this was an atrocity that happened in my community. So I'm going to, I have to stay connected because I am the people I serve. I didn't coin that phrase, but I am. So I can't take it off and not have that connection, because that's my family.
So this question, Lisa, a question from John. Would you encourage younger activists to also make electoral runs, or are they more effective on the outside, putting pressure on whoever happens to be in office? I personally get this question a lot. Oh, why don't you run for Congress? Well, my congressman is Jamal Bowman. He's very good at his job. B, I have not lived my life in the way of a congressperson. But would you, my mouth has gone on some rants in my day, right? So would you encourage younger people, young activists, to get into electoral politics, either at, not just, I think John's question is not just at the congressional level, obviously at the state and local levels as well, or are they more effective being kind of untethered from having to represent a community?
I think it's both. I believe in an inside-outside strategy. I believe that the ones that feel compelled to go in, that have that seasoning, they got enough on the outside to be able to withstand on the inside, then they should be the ones to go in. Because when I think about what happened during Ferguson, I remember being out there on the ground and feeling like at one point, like we were just throwing pebbles at the ocean, because it was like teeing up these balls. Like we were, we were throwing these great pitches, but there was nobody at the plate to hit the ball. So we need both. We need the people on the outside doing the work to be able to give the momentum and be the voice that helps to push those folks that have the power of the pen and have the power of the purse to be able to bring forward the legislation. Because when 2 months before Michael Brown was killed, when my predecessor could have voted to demilitarize the police, he didn't. He didn't do that. If I would have been in Congress at that time, I would have. But so that's why, and so thinking about legislation since then, who is there to write the legislation? Because I can be on the outside all day long, but if there's nobody to write the legislation, if there's nobody to support it, then how do you get the change? You have to have both.
But how much does the need for fundraising, the need for coalition, how much does that constrain you? I guess another way of asking the question is, do you feel constrained because of what you have to do as a congressperson just to kind of get to the next election?
Right. Well, for me, I never once accepted any corporate PAC money, so there's no super PACs. Nobody owns me. I'm not accountable to anyone but the people of St. Louis.
You're not wearing that NASCAR vest with the Coca-Cola on one day.
Big pharma here. No, none of that, and so there is a way to do it. It may take time. It may take more than one run to get that done, but it's worth it. Because the change is worth it. And you know what? If we have to be uncomfortable for a little while to get to what we need, then fine. Because not everybody is not able to do that. But if it's you, if you're the one that carries that, if you feel like, you know what, that's something that I feel like I need to do. I have this burning on the inside of me that's saying, go. Then that's you and you go. And so, yeah, it's tough to raise money. Yeah, absolutely. But we need people in Congress that are willing to support campaign finance reform. We need people in local seats and in state seats that are willing to do that work to help fight against needing the big money in politics. So yes, it may be difficult, but it is necessary. And you can do it without rubbing elbows with anybody to get somewhere. And right now, as I'm, in this place, of course, I want to be back here next year in Congress. I did it the way to where I believe the people of St. Louis can look and say, she did what she said. She stands with us. She didn't change. Be that.
That's a great message. Lisa asks about your influence and figures that inspired you to do your work and to kind of be who you are. I'm reminded of the Evita line. Sometimes it's very difficult to keep momentum if it is you that you are following. Who are you following? Who do you kind of like, who's your fixed kind of point of light that kind of lifts you up? Because you lift so many people up. Who lifts you up, when the darkness comes?
Yeah, different people for different things. So when I think about locally, growing up, my dad was in politics. He's still in politics. He's been in politics for most of my life. And so I was able to be around other politicians and women, woman, may she rest in peace, Betty Thompson, locally, who was the first Black woman on a city council in one of the municipalities in our community. Another one, Hazel Irby, was a similar thing, the first Black woman for her seat there. So looking at like locally, I had people to look to, but my dad was my biggest influence just because of all the work that he did. I saw my dad when he noticed that there were so many young people walking around the community that just in the summer that just didn't have anything to do. My dad said, you know what? Meet me at the city hall. I'm going to put together a workshop. And he put together how you apply for a job. And then he went and got clothes. This is how you dress for your job interview. And then I'm going to take you to the job interview. And you know what? As adults, many of those folks came back to him to tell them how that changed their lives and the lives of their family members because they were able to secure a job. So just like that. But then I look at, even in this seat, I have to look at like what Shirley Chisholm did. I always look at Shirley Chisholm and what she did because I stand there in that. And I'm thinking about what she had to go through as being the only Black woman on the Rules Committee, the only woman, I believe, on the Rules Committee at the time when she was there. And I look at I'll even look at people that's not even in politics. Like I look at Queen Latifah. I look at Gabrielle Union. I do. I look at Tracy Ellis Ross. I look at different people. I look at Kerry Washington and so many others. I look at Viola Davis. I look at Shonda Rhimes. I look at who's doing what and how people are moving stuff because that helps me, to know. And let me say this. I'd be remiss if I did not bring up Nina Turner because in days when I was running at first, Nina Turner would call me and we would have dark Black girl conversations. Well, because it's, being the dark-skinned girl running for Congress, running for office is a little different. So we had those conversations. So I was able to look to her for help in those moments.
It hits different. And I'm so glad, I can't believe you brought that up, but I'm so glad you did, because like it to me, it shows the importance of diversity. It really does. It shows the importance of not being the only, and having a community that you can rely upon, just to give you some strength and give you some ideas and to remind you that you're not crazy. I remember the first time I got death threats for my work. I reached out to Jamie Floyd at WNYC, who's been there and been doing it for a long time, and her response back was, "Oh, welcome to the club. We've got jackets." And it just it was just for a second, just like, okay, I'm gonna make it through this, right? I'm gonna get my Ring doorbell system, and I'm gonna make it through, and it's gonna be okay, right? And just you can't ever underestimate the importance of diversity. Which brings me to Renee, who asked, how do we get more people basically like you into positions of power who will unapologetically advance our interests and needs? Like, how do we make the next Cori Bush?
So I'm a firm believer in, like I said before, looking at what people are doing now. I tell people, when you walk into a grocery store, you have the same grocery store that you go to, and there's this person that's checking you out, checking out your groceries, and you notice this person, something about this person, and you all are talking because you see each other all the time, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm in school to do this and do that, and I was doing this, and but you have access. You can do something to help that person to end up going a different, getting into some areas that they might not have been able to get into before, and, opening up those doors, exposing them, because that's the next somebody, so it's about looking at who's coming next. Every time, whether it was when I was pastoring or now, even when I was working as a nurse, I was always looking at who can I take with me? How can I do this with someone? That's what it's about. Also, if we just look at people who have what people think it takes to be able to do the work, then we'll miss so many people. If we look at, okay, well, this person has been in politics in this particular way, or this person has been a great fundraiser, so we know that they have the charisma to do it, or we know this, if we look at the regular things, then we'll miss the people who actually have the gumption, that actually have the stick and stay, that actually have a courage in a different way. So look at that. So we got to take off what we've been told a politician should look like, and look at the heart, look at the drive. Is this somebody that will fight even when they're being fought against? Is this somebody who will speak truth in the face of any adversity? They may get knocked a little bit, but they stand back up and they go back in. That's how we get more. Right now, what we see is, especially with Black women, it's written, it's documented that Black women receive the least amount of money in donations running for office, especially Congress, than anybody else on the planet. We won't get the people that we're trying to have in these seats if we're not willing to support them publicly. So, publicly support, put on a shirt, help, show up, whatever needs to happen. I'm not gonna go into a big campaign thing, but I think that it's our support. When we look at, well, such and such is not supporting them yet, we're gonna wait for the gatekeeper to support, or we're gonna, when we do that, that's how we miss people.
Oh, absolutely. Look, 100%. There's the problem that we have in this country of like, oh, I would support a woman, not that woman, though. I would support a Black woman, not that Black woman. Like there's always something. When a person is actually there asking for the support, needing the help, that's when it goes away. I'm always reminded of Tiffany Cross now has a show on MSNBC, but has written a book about her kind of experiences. She had this organization called The Beat that was really important. That was one of these kind of Politico style, morning DC rags that you well know. Everybody reads these rags to just get a sense of like what the news is and where people are to start their day. So she was doing it from a Black perspective, which, you know, is sorely missed from these publications. She needed capital and she couldn't get it. And there's a whole problem in this country about just getting venture capital, getting capital from the white tech bros to the hands of Black people who are going to be able to use it, and you can't get it, right? If you're a white guy with a random idea for, like, you know, table salt, you'll get funded. But if you're a Black woman with an idea to really move things forward, it's very hard to get your hands on capital. So certainly, if you know some people with capital, if you have some, you know, use your voice. But that kind of brings me to my last question, at least one of my last questions, is what do you look for? What do you need in an ally? Because I personally have a very high standard for my white allies in terms of what I need them to be able and willing to do. You know, I need you to sound like me in the rooms that I ain't invited in, basically. Right? Because there's a reason why I'm not invited. So if you are, you gotta go and you gotta be me for an hour or for a dinner or for a retreat. What do you need in an ally? Who you know, a white ally, a male ally? Like what do you want them to be able to do?
Right. Like you said, they need to represent even when none of us that they would have to represent in that room are present. You know, represent us in the way that person that has never heard what they're bringing to the table can now then take that and speak that to somebody else that may not have heard the message. Because if you have one opportunity to drop a seed, one opportunity to inspire, one opportunity to change someone's mind, someone's heart, then use that moment to do it. And so we need you to be that. So like I always talk about, needing our white community members to be anti-racist. I don't just need to hear you say I'm not a racist. You know, what does that mean to me? Like you don't lynch people? Like, I don't know. What does that mean? You know, I need you to be anti-racist, which means you are doing the work to eradicate racism in this country. And whatever that looks like at the Thanksgiving Day table, you know, because some of y'all still at, you know, Christmas dinner, at, you know, 4th of July, you know, wherever, you know, in those boardrooms, the courtrooms, wherever you are, whatever you do, you know, in the education system, in wherever you have influence or access, you put it there, because we need it everywhere. It's institutionalized. We need it everywhere. It's systemic. We need it everywhere. So that is how, if it's a man speaking up for issues that concern, you know, people like me, then, you know, we need you to speak in the way that you would care about how somebody's treating your child, your daughter, you know, or speak to it from the standpoint of, I may not understand it. I may not know it all, but this is what they need, you know. So we don't have to always we shouldn't have to be directly affected by something to be able to advocate for people who have a need.
Look, I 100%, right? Like, because there are issues that I don't know about. Like, I'm not an expert in damn near everything, right? But you listen to people who are experts, right? So like, I might not know what the trans community needs on X, Y, or Z, right? But then I talk to trans activists and they say like, we need this bill to pass and we need that bill to fail. I'm like, okay, let's pass that bill and not pass that bill. Exactly. I don't have to be like, there are experts out there. You can just go listen to them and
right.
help.
Right. That's what they're for.
Right. All right, I'll get you out of here on this. I got a question. It's been happening in chat a lot. I mean, the obvious question, but like, are Democrats going to win in November, and how? And is it going to be okay?
Democrats can win. Democrats can win. Let me just say, I know we have about 30 Dems on the House side that are retiring or moving on to do something else. But all is not lost. You know, the thing is, if it's not November 2022 and we haven't lost yet, then that means there's still time. So what we have to do, there is yet time. Look, there is yet time. I would not be in this seat if I did not have optimism and high hopes and believe in something bigger than me. So because of that, we just have to do the work. We have to do the work, and the work cannot look like what's regular, what people assume the work is, what people assume the message is, or what's palatable, or what, we got to be willing to stand. Like, people are looking for what some folks looked at when they supported Donald Trump. They felt they saw this fighter that was going to, flip tables and, be that type of person to bring about a change. But that's what some people wanted to see. And now when we don't have a lot of the things that Democrats ran on, we don't have voting rights. It's just not done. We don't have George Floyd. That's not done. We don't have, we snatched child tax credit away from people when we're saying we're pulling 40% of children out of poverty. We that ended up leaving, we need, that's what we can do this if we get our messaging straight. And if we tell the people what we've done, because it's not like we haven't done anything. We've been able to really help people, especially with the American Rescue Plan. We need to talk about those millions of dollars of investments that have gone into our states, into districts around this country.
Representative Bush, thank you so much for your time. You are one of those people. You are one of those people who lifts me up, who I think about out there fighting, that if you can keep, when you were fighting for the debt, for the rent forgiveness, the eviction moratorium, you're out there literally in the streets, literally in the cold. Yes. And like, you remind me, I mean, this is going to sound ridiculous, but like, you remind me, like, if you can get out there in the streets, I can write some more words. Like, I can find the strength to type again.
Yes. And you know what? And I forgot, Harriet Tubman is the first person that I always see. So what you just said, it's like, if she could do that, if she could go back and go get more, I can do this. So that's what I had on my mind. She went back.
I would never have gone back. I've been in Montreal being like, oui, monsieur. Like, I don't know, but she went back, man. Anyway, so thank you for all of your work. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I forget what the next one is, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome. I will be back in the middle of March to promote my book. I'll be talking with you guys again over that. So thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate all of you, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.